Hi, Ranger Leo here to welcome you back for another evening of storytelling from historic Blue Heron, Kentucky. Tonight's story will be told from the entrance of Mine 18, where many of the people who lived in the Blue Heron community would have worked day in and day out. And to my left, you can see some of the remnants of those mining days in the form of coal cars, which are illuminated by lanterns here at the entrance to Mine 18. Tonight's storyteller is Ranger Jordan Hewitt, who will be telling the story, Bill's Luckiest Day. I will now trade places with Ranger Jordan. Enjoy.
You know, as I walk out of the opening here at Mine 18, I can't help but think a little bit about the people who worked here. Miners are sometimes superstitious people, because when you work with the weight of a mountain over your head, anything can happen. And any bit of luck that you can bring with you is always a good thing. Like one thing they used to say is, it's always bad luck to whistle in the mine. No one was allowed to whistle because I had a canary, a little bird in a cage there in the mine. And they wanted to be able to hear that canary because if there was bad air and the canary died, well, everybody knew to get out. So it's bad luck to whistle in the mine. And other little superstitions like that. Miners look for ways to take a little bit of good luck with them when they go underground. It reminds me of the story that they tell about Bill Sharp. Well, you see, Bill, he had never had a lucky day in his whole life. Bill was born on Friday the 13th. He was the youngest son in his family, born on Friday the 13th. When the company doctor came to the house to deliver him, a black cat had run across the doctor's path on the way to the home to deliver him. Doc Stevens walked into the house where his mother was giving birth, and he said, "This boy's going to have a hard time in life." And it never seemed like Bill had any good luck. Before the age of 5, he was struck by lightning twice. And as they always say, you know that lightning doesn't strike the same place twice. By the time he was 7, no one would let him touch a mirror. He never meant to break them. It just seemed like any time he was around a mirror, they would fall off the wall and break, or they would slip out of his hands and break. It got to where his mother threw all the mirrors away in the house, except the little one she kept in her purse to do her makeup on Sunday morning. People especially thought that Bill was bad luck when the car wreck happened. You see, he was in the car with his parents when it ran off the road into the river, and his parents died. And Bill would have died too if it wasn't for his brother Buster. You see, Buster was older than Bill by about 10 years. And even though Buster couldn't save his parents, he made sure that his younger brother was safe. Well, after the car wreck, everybody in town thought that Bill was bad luck. How else would his parents die when the car runs off the road and he and Buster be able to survive? And it was hard because nobody wanted to hang around him. And now he was an orphan. And nobody wanted him to live in their house. And so Buster, his older brother, brought him home to his wife Samantha, and they became his parents. Bill was thinking about Buster when he showed up to work at the mine one morning. Walked up to the mine, and he came up to the checkboard, which is a wooden board that I have here on my left. Has nails in it and little brass tags that have numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to this one has 25. Every miner had a number. And when a miner would show up for work, he would take his tag off the board and would go in for his shift. This was an easy way to let the boss know who showed up to work, but also if there was an accident, we know who's stuck inside. Well, Bill came up to the checkboard and got his number, which was 13. Of course, an unlucky number, the number that haunted Bill so much in his life. And he looked at his brother's number, 7, a lucky number. And he wondered how Buster was doing. You see, the week before, Buster had been sick with a cough and a fever, and Doc Stevens, the company doctor, went down to the house and checked him out, and he said, "You'll get over it. Don't know exactly what it is, but you'll be fine." And Bill didn't think that his brother was going to show up to work. So Bill grabs his check tag, he gets his shovel and his pick, and he walks back into the shaft to his room in the mine. He has to crawl a mile back under the earth in the darkness, and finally gets back to the little section that's dedicated to him, which is far away from everybody else's, because everyone else is afraid of Bill. They're afraid of the bad luck that follows him through his life. And they don't want to be in a mine accident with him. About 9 o'clock, Bill gets his shovel and he starts clearing out the coal and the dirt in the room that he's in, when all of a sudden, here's a booming voice behind him and a poke in the ribs. "Hey, younger brother, how you doing?" Bill turns around and looks Buster right in the face. He said, "Buster, I didn't think that you were going to make it to work today." And Bill adjusted his carbide light just a little bit, and he looked at his brother's face, and his brother's face was real pale and real gaunt. Eyes were kind of sunken back. Bill could tell he didn't feel good. Buster said, "Well, I'm just fine. I'm just fine. I'll be fine." And just then a deep cough rattled all through his bones. Bill said, "You might need to go home, Buster. You don't need to be in here like this." Buster said, "Bill, I promise I'm fine. I'm feeling a lot better than I was." And Bill, being the younger brother, he said, "Well, okay, lazy, you take the shovel and let's start clearing up the coal and go ahead and get our first load out. You know, it's payday." So the two of them worked there for a few minutes, and finally they had their car loaded full of coal. And Bill got up and he started pushing it out into the main cavern of the mine, when all of a sudden they heard thunder. And not the thunder that you hear on a rainy day. It was the thunder of a mountain collapsing on top of them. And rock is falling all over the place. It's coming down in pieces. And finally, Buster says, "Bill, move, get out of the way." And Buster grabs his brother and they throws him down and they roll and smack against the face of the mine. When the dust settled, they looked around and noticed they're trapped a mile underground in total darkness without the hope of getting out. Immediately, they cut off their carbide lights because those lights burn oxygen. And if they're cut off from their oxygen source, well, those lights will burn up that extra oxygen they need. So they cut off their lights and they sit there in the darkness and they start planning. And they start planning, they start thinking. And Bill says, "I know what I'll do." He takes his pick and shovel and he starts trying to shovel and move away that rock. And realizes there's too much. And trying to move all of it will only weaken him more, which will make him breathe heavier and use more oxygen, the precious little they have. Finally, Buster says, "Here, Bill, let me dig some." And Bill says, "No, Buster, I'm going to come down and sit down with you for a little bit." He didn't want his brother to have to shovel more, as sick as he was. So finally, they sit there in the cool darkness against the wall of the mine. And they start thinking about old times that they used to have with Mom and Dad. They start talking about the Christmases they had, the hunting trips their dad used to take them on, the church picnics they always went to with their mother and their dad. They talk about the car wreck a little bit. And Bill remembers fondly how Buster decided to raise him, decided to take him in, him and his bride Samantha. And finally Bill says, Buster, I've never had any good luck in my life. Nobody's going to come back here and try to find me. There's going to be nobody who's going to care enough to come back here and dig me out. And Buster said, brother, you can't give up hope. You've got a lot to live for. You're going to make it out of here. An hour passed. 2 hours. 3 hours. After that, they couldn't tell. Finally, they hear scratching on the other side of that wall. And Bill says, Buster, they're here. They're digging us out. And Bill runs over to the opening and where it's covered up, and he says, hey, we're here. We're still alive. We're here. And he looks around and he says, Buster, they're digging us out. And they start moving rocks. And then all of a sudden, there's a little pinhole of light. And Bill looks out and he can see the rescuers, and the hole gets bigger. And finally the rescuers say, here he is. And they reach in and they grab Bill and they pull him out. And Bill looks around at Buster, and Buster's still sitting against the mine face. And Buster says, good luck, Bill. And immediately, all the rock in the room that they were in crashed. And Bill watched it come down over the form of his brother. And then a puff of air goes through the mine. And Bill says, no, we've got to go back. We can't leave him there. And the rescuers are grabbing him and having to manhandle him. And they can't let him go. And they're pulling him and pulling him. He says, we've got to go back. We've got to go after Buster. And finally, they get him out to the opening of the mine. He says, guys, we have to go back. You left my brother. And they say, what? He said, we left Buster back there. And finally, one of the rescuers says, hey, boss, you need to talk to him. He's lost too much oxygen or something. The foreman comes up and says, what's wrong, Bill? And Bill says, boss, we left Buster back there. We have to go back. He's probably still alive. And the boss says, Bill, Buster didn't show up for work this morning. And Bill says, no, Buster was back there in the room where we worked together. He's back there right now. And the foreman says, okay, let's go to the checkboard. Let's see if your brother's number's gone. What's your brother's number, Bill? He said, it's 7. And the foreman says, look, right there's the 7. He didn't show up for work today. And Bill says, well, maybe he forgot. We've got to go back there. And finally, someone looks around and there's Doc Stevens, the company doctor. And Doc Stevens says, Bill, I have some bad news for you. Your brother died this morning at home. I was on my way to tell you when the accident happened. And I couldn't get back there, and I was just waiting for you to come out, and I was hoping you were safe. And Bill said, no, this can't be true. And Doc Stevens said, yes, I was there. Bill says, no. So he starts running away from the mine. And he runs down the coal camp. He runs down one street and one house, and he runs over. And finally, he gets to Buster's house. And in the driveway is the county hearse. He walks up the driveway, and there's the hearse from the funeral home. He goes up to the door, and he opens the door. And Buster's wife, Samantha, is sitting on the couch crying. And she looks up with those tears in her eyes, and she said, Bill, I'm so glad that you're safe. I'm so glad that you got out. I couldn't stand the thoughts of losing both of you. And he hugged Samantha and didn't know what to say. And Samantha wiped her eyes and she said, his last words were of you. She said he hadn't been awake. He wasn't alert. And then a little after 9, his eyes popped open. He said, Bill's in trouble. And then he was gone. He died. And Bill remembered that was the time the accident happened. There's a knock on the door. And Bill goes and opens the door, and it's the preacher. And the preacher says, Bill, I'm so glad to see you're safe. And he says, Samantha, do you want to talk about the service we're going to have for your husband? Samantha says, yeah, we will. Let's go in the kitchen. I've got some coffee on the stove. And she says, Bill, you can go see your brother if you want to. And in the corner of their little company house was a coffin. And Bill walked over to the coffin, and there lay Buster in a brand new 3-piece suit. He'd never had a suit before in his life. But look at him now. Look how handsome he was. Bill looked down at his brother. He kind of looked up and was thinking. And he looked back down at his brother and he said, you old scoundrel. You had to come back from the dead just to be sure that my luck wasn't going to run out today. And nothing. Buster was dead. Bill walked over to the window, started looking out at everybody walking through town, looked at the hearse, and the one thing he never could explain to his family after that, and nobody could ever understand, when he walked back over to the coffin to look at his brother one more time, there was a faint smile that came up on Buster's lips, knowing that his brother was safe. And after that, Bill never had any bad luck again. And I bet you Buster had something to do with that.